Hello and welcome to episode 31 of Fergo and the Freak. I'm that bloke from Rugby League Project, Andrew Ferguson. You can find me on Twitter at AndrewRP. Joining me once again is League Freak, who you can find on Twitter at League Freak. How are you this fine morn?
I'm really good this fine morn. Really excited about this episode as I am every single episode, but we've got a very special guest and somebody that has their own podcast and likes our podcast, and I always like things like that.
Yeah, we like a bit of mutual love.
Yeah.
So today
That
we've got
sounded so dodgy. Yeah.
Hence why I was moving on so quickly. Today we've got the editor of Inside Sport magazine, a retro rugby league connoisseur, host of the Dead in Goal podcast. You can find him on Twitter at JamesSmith1001. Welcome to the brilliant James Smith.
Thank you very much, fellas. It's the best intro ever. Fantastic. Thoroughly undeserved, but it's a thrill to be on your show. I've enjoyed it since you first kicked off. It's and it's a bit surreal being a part of it, so it's going to be fun.
You're being far too kind.
Sorry, Andrew. Sorry, James. Inside Sport, you've got a new edition coming out this month,
Yep.
and it's got one of the game's best. I think he's maybe I would say he's a top 5 player in the game right now on the front cover. Cameron Munster. Tell us a little bit about the issue that's coming out, and it's on sale now, I believe, from today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk about it. Yeah, it's at our news agents from today, and having Cameron on the cover was a bit of an idea I had a couple of months ago, because when you work in magazines, you have to think well in advance. And what happens a lot of the time is athletes, go through controversial things and they get injured and they drop in and out of form. But Cameron was someone I had in mind because he's just a safe superstar these days, and you can tell that his star is on the rise. And I thought, if I marry it up with the July issue, comes out just after Origin 1, should be good timing. And thankfully he's gone through the year uninjured and had a pretty solid Origin 1, and looks like he's going to lead Queensland for the rest of the series, and who knows, in a couple of years' time, take over from DCE as a skipper and inspire them going forward. So yeah, I really wanted him to be on the cover sometime this year, and so that was the thinking behind that. And the story is mainly about it's my typical sort of interview where we all know who he is, but who's the bloke? Like, where's he from? I didn't know anything about his past. Like, wasn't really particularly interested in the off-field controversial stuff. I just wanted, I like to know who people are, like, what was their first taste or touch with rugby league, and he was really good about that. He went right back to his junior days, coming through the ranks with Corey Oates and back in Rockhampton, and it's come out really well. Really happy with it.
Yeah, and I guess it's one of the features that, because I was buying Inside Sport when I was a teenager. I used to read it in roll call, and it's one of the things I always liked about it is that instead of doing like the regular profile of a player or like the thing that you sort of see everywhere else, Inside Sport has always seemed to take a bit of a different tack and looked at a player, as you say, instead of looking at the off-field stuff, which a lot of people have done and things like that, you look into his past. And I've always liked that about Inside Sport, that they will take somebody that you know in the sporting world, and they will give you a sense of who they are more as a person, or something from their background that really formed them into the champion that they are. And that's one of the fantastic things about your magazine.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Freak. And it's sort of, it feels weird being where we are in the marketplace and being with within the media cycle. I often wonder what people think of it from the outside, because I don't, and nobody else from the Inside Sport team really goes to press conferences or anything like that, but we still end up coming up with these yarns every month. And the thing is, we're not really chasing the to the minute story about these people, like. And to be fair to the subject, there's a lot more going on with the character than what happens on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you do want to meet Cameron Munster and you know what else makes him tick. Yeah, you're going to read a mag like ours. So yeah, and that's a really satisfying thing about being with the magazine. We've always done that, and yeah, it's a really fun way to do things, I reckon. Yeah.
Do you find that there's any huge differences in the backstory or childhood, say, of past players who you've spoken to on the podcast and for the magazine compared to those today?
Like you're talking about, say, basically comparing Greg Florimo with Cameron Munster as far as the background goes, that sort of thing?
Yeah, like so, not so much about the actual first grade career, but their path to get into first grade and, what their childhood was like and any hardships they had.
Definitely, yeah. Oh, sorry to cut you off. Yeah, definitely is like you talk to those old blokes from the 70s and the 80s, and their stories always revolve around their working life and how footy interacted with that. Whereas the young blokes of today, the first thing they'll tell you about their careers is what was the first rep team they entered. So like I got into Harold Matthews at Parramatta or Penrith, and so like. Yeah, and that's basically where it goes from there. You are a little bit limited as to how much they'll give away because they think that you want to hear all about those initial rep teams, whereas you want to you do want to find out, where are you actually from and how come you got into footy, that sort of thing. But they find those questions really interesting. A lot of the modern stars, for the first time a journo isn't after a soundbite; they're actually after a story about where they came from, and it just ends up being a really fun experience chatting to even the modern players for the magazine. So it's good, yeah.
And do you sense that moment when you're talking to a player and you're almost seeing them that they realise, hang on, this is a little bit different to what I'm used to. As you say, you're not just looking for a soundbite. You're not looking for I played in this rep team and that rep team and blah, blah, blah. They're actually, it's like, I've got a chance here to talk about like who I am. Do you see that moment in a lot of these athletes where they sense that out of you when you're interviewing them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it comes pretty early on. Like it only takes a couple of minutes for a player to realise that you're not, that they're not looking at you and you're thinking headline, or opening para of the 10 paragraph clickbait story. Like, and I'm a pretty chilled out sort of person naturally anyway, so I can really sit down with a Paul Gallen or whoever like that, and they will give me more, sort of going off instinct than what they would, a daily sort of journo. I think
you can't say names.
I don't, and the thing is, I don't really know any of them, so I'm not going to pretend that any of them are close mates or enemies or whatever. But I don't really know any of them. But yeah, that's an important thing when you're sitting down to write a long form story. You really have to give off a vibe that there's no hurry here. Like I'm not trying to drive things in a particular direction. Just chill out and tell your story. So it does help a lot that way. Yeah.
Do you find some of the players in those situations, especially the current ones too, that they try and put their guard up as soon as you want to ask them something because of any sort of apprehension they may have about, what's he going to ask about?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And even if, you notice, like when you meet a modern player, you start to have this normal conversation that you would with any other human, and then when it comes time to sort of start the interview, you start saying things like, "Oh, okay, we might kick off now then, hey." Your first question is, it's like you're talking to a different player, a different person almost. It's like, yeah, okay, the game has started. Here's my, Q&A style, and to be fair to the player, like they've grown up watching the generation before them talking to the media, and so that's how they've done it, and so that's how they must do it as well. It's pretty interesting from their side, like what they think the media game is, and to be fair to them, the media hasn't treated the players very well over the last couple of years. So yeah, there is this automatic wall that goes up pretty much 100% of the time until you're about 20 or 30 minutes into an interview, and then it's not there anymore. They start to trust you and know that you're going to write a positive story about them in a magazine that goes for 8 pages. So that's not really the environment for your soundbite, is it? It'd have to be a long soundbite to carry that off. So yeah, that's how that works for me. I've found.
So have you ever had an interview with an athlete where you kind of, obviously you know a fair bit about them when you're going into it, but where the interview, at some point they started telling you something about their story as a person and it really jumped out at you or shocked you, or you realised that you were finding out something about this person that a lot of people didn't know, and that was going to be the basis or the main storyline that you were going to be writing about? Is there one that really has jumped out at you over your time writing for Inside Sport?
Yeah, probably. And this is a bit left field, but the former Diamonds captain in netball, Laura Geitz. I've always looked at her as the archetypical Australian sporting captain. You know, a perfect appearance and leadership and all that kind of thing. And she started telling me how her first game as Diamonds skipper, the coach pulled her off the court halfway through the game because she wasn't managing it very well. That shocked me. I thought that's not how captaincy works. Like, it is, you know, I'm proud to be the captain, and out I go, and this is me leading the team. And what she was saying was she stuffed it up so badly. She was thinking about everybody else's job and not her own, and so she left her defensive role. It was in tatters. She was worried about everybody else instead of trusting everybody else's instinct and abilities as players themselves. That's probably the one that sticks out the most. Well, that's massive for a player to relive a story prompted.
Prompted, yeah.
To bring that first game up where there was that time where I got pulled off the court and I was the Australian captain in my first game as captain. That really revealed a human side to her that day for me. So that always sticks in my mind, that story. Yeah.
Now, you are a self-confessed retro footy fan, no doubt about it. Now, I was wondering, what period of the game do you think defines retro footy? And I've got a really, really bad analogy, and that is when I go to JB Hi-Fi these days and you go to the retro music area, you used to go there, and it used to be always music from the 70s and 80s. And I go there now and there's like the albums of Nirvana are there, and I sit there arguing going, I'm not retro. I never used to be retro. Now all of a sudden I'm in the retro period.
That's great.
What period in time do you think is the period that you define as retro that you love the most?
Yeah, now these days I think it's the 80s. Yeah, I know where you're coming from though. Like 10 years ago, I would have thought it was the 70s. And the thing that strikes me about the word retro is, you know how you used to see all the daggy sort of writing on street signs and all that sort of thing. It was like supposed to be really flashy. It was basically 2 lines drawn for every word. Anyway, it's hard to explain, but yeah, that was like the 70s sort of fonts that were around at the time. But yeah, now as far as footy goes, it's the 80s for sure. My brain, as soon as somebody says retro footy, it just goes straight to those 1980s editions of Big League with people like Cliffy Lyons on the cover, and you know the team pages that were just basically white pages with black ink on them, team lists, team emblems up either side, and that's my awesome memories of the 80s. It's just and it is idealising something that was again pretty daggy when you think back to it.
But I guess the game also felt a bit more innocent back then. Like, you didn't have all the media intruding into every good, bad, and I suppose mostly bad part of what was going on. It was just sort of, these are all your footy heroes, and I talk about them every week, and that's just the only sort of real interaction you had with them. So it was, I suppose, a bit more of an innocent time for rugby league.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, like, I bet you, he sadly passed away a number of years ago, but I bet you if you asked Chippy Filingos what his relationship with the players were, he pumped out breaking story day after day, but I bet you he drank with so many of them. Like, he would have had really trusting relationships with these blokes. It's just a different world now. But just to go back to that innocent sort of part, I remember I think there's a grand final. I want to say it's 89 or 88 or something, but there's footage of the dying moments of the Winfield Cup grand final from one of those years. And, like, you know how they start to show, they start to sort of pan, they look for the trophy sitting on a pedestal, and they say, oh, this is what so and so's about to win in 10 minutes time. Look at the Winfield Cup in all its glory, and it wasn't that on this stage. What they did was they started panning for the trophy, and he, like, how the cameraman runs up and down the sidelines, and the cords are always like tangled up somewhere, like who knows what they lead to. But basically, the Winfield Cup, they found it about 10 minutes to go till the grand final was over, and it's just sitting on the grass on top of a bunch of cables on the sideline. And it's like, you wouldn't have thought anything about it at the time. You would have gone, oh, there's the trophy. Yeah, cool. Yeah. But now it's like, that was probably the most famous trophy the game will ever have. It's just sitting on the grass. I love that. Yeah, that's rugby league for you, and it's not going to change. Like, you can introduce high salaries to players and stuff, but it's still the same, demographic of people playing the game, isn't it? Like, really.
Yeah. I always think about what would happen now if the current trophy was dropped off the back of a car on the highway like Mal Meninga did, and people would go crazy for about a million different reasons. And back then it was like, let's just wrap a towel around it and still hold it up.
I'd laugh it off.
Yeah. Oh, the first issue would be, and what would happen was, it would fall off the back of the ute or whatever. It'd smash through somebody's windscreen. Yeah. Someone would get hurt. They'd drive off the side of the road, and it'd be this massive string of events.
It sounds like you're pitching an Amy ad.
That's hilarious.
Damn it. And it'd all get traced back, and it'll all be Todd Greenberg's fault. So,
yeah.
and a referee.
Yeah. If he hadn't have awarded that penalty, that those players would have gotten plastered and done all this other stuff. Yeah.
They wouldn't have won it. They wouldn't have lost it. It's always the ref's fault.
Oh, yeah. Just ignore the other 79 and a half minutes of play. And it's another area altogether, isn't it?
Yeah, it's terrible.
I was going to say, so what aspect from that period would you like to see return to the game? We've already got facial hair back.
Yeah.
Maybe tape around the ears?
Yeah, like, why did that stop? Because it's like, people still have heads and ears. Like, why did that? What was even that for anyway? Was that to stop people's ears from getting ripped off? Or like,
I assume it has something to do with the way the scrums were in the old days. I assume hookers in the scrums would probably try and grab opposing front rowers' ears or something like that. I don't know. Oh, okay. It's so crazy.
Yeah. No, you just triggered a thought there. I want to see proper scrums returned. And I think if you had that, we're always looking for ways to tire the players out and make it more of a game of attrition and blah, blah, blah. If you made those forwards work extra hard, pushed against each other in a scrum, that would be quite taxing in itself. Whereas now scrums are just, they're opportunities for the players to have a breather. And a couple of months ago, I was watching a Newcastle game, and this really ticked me right off and made me think, what's the point of these scrums anyway? It was towards the end of the game. I can't remember who was winning, but the scrum was near the sideline, and the scrum was that important that Edric Lee was feeding the ball into the scrum, and I thought, this is the official death of the scrum. Like, what's the point of all this? It's like a dance that we have to have where, like, no one even tries, and then what happens is, I love it when one team decides to push. They've obviously planned for it at training. Oh, what we'll do is we'll actually push in the scrum, and I've seen that like teams who do that get penalised for pushing. Yeah, and it's like, this is wrong. Like, Anyway, that's what I'd love to see back, because they were hookers back then. They shouldn't be called hookers now. They should be called number nines. Like, we've never seen Cameron Smith hook for a ball, have we? Well, I haven't. Whereas you see all those old press pictures taken during matches, and poor Roy Simmons looks half dead as he's on the bottom of the scrum, and that's why these blokes don't look very well these days, because they're on the bottom of these scrums. And before, without ranting too much, the scrum wins used to be a point of honour, like a real point of difference between the teams now, and now you don't even know what the scrum count is. So
they used to be a stat, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they used to in that old Big League magazine. There used to be a box, and you kept the scrum count. Does that make me sound old enough for you? Oh, yeah.
No, I used to do the same thing, and I remember there was a game, and it might have been in about '89.
Yep.
And I was listening to it on the radio, and I was trying to keep up with the scrum counts for the first time. And I think the box only went up to 15 for penalties and scrums. And this game was played in absolute mess. I think it was at Arana Park. It might have been Balmain and West. And it was just an absolute dog of a game. And there's still about 20 minutes left to go, and I'd already circled all of the 15 boxes on the west side for scrums. I was like, what do I do now?
And then in today's game, it'd still be a ref's fault, despite the fact that there was a need for 15 scrums in the game or more. Yeah, still be ref's fault. Yeah.
I like to think the last proper scrum we had was when Anthony Watts had a go at Robbie Farah, and then the next scrum, Robbie Farah beat the shit out of Anthony Watts. I like to think that's the last real scrum we had in rugby league. But I've often thought about if they had a rule where they're not allowed to reset the scrum. Like, once the ball's away, doesn't matter what happens, the referee has to say play on, so that if there's a push in the scrum, it doesn't matter. If the scrum falls apart, like, they should just go on with it. And I think that would turn a scrum into a contest again, because both teams would know there really is a chance that we could get the ball back here. And outside of having the hooker just drop out the bottom of the scrum and jump on the ball, if they just said, once you feed the scrum, it's play on no matter what, I think that would have a big effect on a scrum.
Yeah, and you're right, because calling a scrum back, that's a bit of a joke too, because you've called all these players into this corner of the field, and everyone's here, and the ball's out. No, and it's almost as if they're saying, no, that didn't look right. Let's do it again.
Yeah,
and it's really strange. I will hate to talk about scrums all day, but the thing about them also is just the very nature of them is a bit weird, isn't it? So one team drops the ball, and if you go by my theory of feeding them properly and make sure they're contested properly, if you drop the ball, you have a 50% chance of getting the ball back. That's a bit weird in itself too. So just to confuse things a little bit.
Well, there was a period in the mid-20s, without droning on too much about history, where the game actually decided in off-season that it was going to trial where the referee fed the scrum.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Just to make it fair and even.
Oh, can you imagine the drama there? All you hear is he's feeding it more into their side than ours. And
exactly right, which is why after about 2 or 3 weeks of trialling it, they went, no, we're not doing this.
Probably the best solution would be for the props on that side where the ball is being fed to just create like a tunnel or something, and the ball has to go in there.
I've got an idea, and that is that a scrum should be the only place where punching is legal.
Brilliant. That'd attract the mums to the sport, wouldn't it? That'd be great.
Well, this is a funny thing. There's this talk that, punching was causing mums and women and kids to turn away. And I was watching the game, I might have been on the weekend when South had all that bit of a brouhaha in their game. And at half time, Yvonne O'Keefe says there's a bit of a good old stick up. It was fantastic to watch. She's supposed to be the person they're protecting, and she's sitting there going, I love fighting, bring it back.
I know. What do you do with that? Like, somebody who actually likes the old school fibre of the sport, you can't have that. Yeah.
Silence them.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, it's interesting watching that dynamic play out, isn't it? Like, you've got a bunch of ex-footy players on the panel, but they're supposed to be all ultra-modern about stuff. I don't know where you were going to go with this interview, but did you see Tommy's interview with Yvonne like a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I missed it too.
Oh, it's so good. Like, yeah, you got to watch it. And basically, I think she asked the question. They start talking about Arthur Beetson and how great mates Artie and Tommy were. And I think she asked him something like, "What did you like most about Artie?" You know, I think she was expecting what a good bloke he was and how loyal and understanding he was. And then he just went into this story about how in a test match, Artie smashed this Pommy player's jaw in a scrum. And he said, oh, like he was like reminiscing the hell out of that story. It's like, well, there you go. You've got an old player in front of you and you ask them about the old game. Like, yeah, that's kind of what you get.
Oh, jeez.
True story. I went to Newcastle with my missus several years ago, and we got off and we were waiting for a taxi at the front of the airport there. And standing there just having a chat amongst themselves with no one else around was just Tommy and Artie.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. I was just standing there having a chat. And I went, and the funny thing is, I used to work at the East Leagues Club, and I used to see Arthur Beetson when he was working there coming in. He was the only bloke who'd say g'day to everyone as he's walking through. The rest were all just coaching staff and players. They just walked through to wherever they were having their meeting.
Yeah.
And I was always working near the front area where they came in, and he always said g'day to me. And when we saw him at the airport, he looked at me and he had that look in his eye of, I know you.
Wow. Isn't that great? Like,
he's always up for a chat. Absolutely lovely human.
Yeah. And that's the thing that sticks with people. Hey, like, you can talk about media training and all that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, like, you know, footy fans are investing their spare time and their passion into the sport. And if someone who they follow just has like a 30-second conversation with you and and gives you an autograph or a selfie or whatever, that lasts that can last someone's whole life as far
Absolutely.
as a true life memory goes.
Yeah. I know. I met Arthur Beetson at a lunch. It was like a lunch with him, and I can't remember who the other person was there, unfortunately. But, you know who it was? It was Gary Freeman. He was hilarious. So it was Arthur Beetson and Gary Freeman. And afterwards, I went up to Arthur Beetson and I had a grand final book, and he signed the grand final book for me. And he signed it like, enjoy the game. And I'll never forget that. And I always tell people to enjoy the game when I know that they're going to watch a game or something. And as you say, it's something that just sticks with you, and it's a memory for a lifetime. And it's something that I hope that this generation of players, and there are people like that. I mean, Thurston is like that, for instance, where they realise that they can have that effect on people of all ages, that they can give them that memory of a lifetime, because I'll never forget that. And it's interesting hearing you talking about that now.
Yeah, no, it really hits a chord with me too, because I was taken to Penrith Park every second weekend, for the first 15 years of my life, and you'd meet those superstar players, and they'd all like sign the back of whatever you had, or whatever your dad had in his wallet. Like I remember Mal Meninga signed the back of. My dad was a TAFE teacher at Mount Druitt, and all he had for Mal Meninga to sign was the back of a business card, TAFE business card that he had, and I've still got it. Like I've still got this card, and you hate to bang on about the superstars all the time being perfect and all that sort of thing, but the true stars of the game get it. You know, like Jonathan Thurston. Can you imagine? I know he does it every week, and for whatever reason they honed in on it on this particular night. But do you remember that? I think he was a Storm supporter, and Thurston went over and gave him a kicking tee. He does it all the time, I know, but it was just on TV. This particular, no, it was his headgear. That's right. It was his headgear, and just a look on that kid's face. It's just, you put like every grown-up fan put themselves in that situation. Can you imagine like Peter Sterling doing that, like when you were young, or a Ray Price, or a Phil Blake, or a Cliff Lyons? Like, you know, it just changes you forever. And the fortunately or unfortunately, it's the real superstars who really get that. And I like that about them. Yeah.
Although, you know, and it reminds me, I remember going to a State of Origin game I think it would have been maybe 96. And it was when the crowds, I mean, it was easy to get to a State of Origin game. They weren't sold out. Yeah. And me and my friends were sitting like near like the cheap seats, and one of them knew Justin Morgan, and Justin Morgan just grabbed us all and said, "Here, come sit with me." And look, it was the halfway line on the concourse. It wasn't anything special, but I'll always remember Justin Morgan saying, "Hey, fellas, come over here," and it was something he didn't have to do, but I will always remember that, and he will never remember me. Like, I was just the really extremely good-looking one of the group, but yeah, it's funny how little things like that just stick with you, and it's funny, like just signing autographs and things like that. The littlest things in the world a player can do for a fan, and they just remember it for life. It's something that's beautiful about rugby league, and I hope that we never lose that, and that players don't become completely inaccessible. And I don't think they will. I think that that's a big part of the game, and that players still understand that no matter all of the scrutiny they get from mostly the media and stuff, that the fans, they just want them to be happy and they want to enjoy it. Even if they're a rival or something, everyone just wants to enjoy this thing that we all love together, which is rugby league.
Yeah. And you're doing it in your spare time. So if it's not fun, then you're not going to do it, are you? You're not going to get on the train or, sit in traffic on the way to a game. Like, you're just not going to take part. So yeah, and
that's why I don't watch rugby union.
Oh, there's plenty of reasons for that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I had one quick question before you duck off, and that was: is there anyone from rugby league's past who you would like to have written about or interviewed?
Like that's died, or
it could be any.
Thankfully, I've still got. Oh gosh, yeah, I'd love to interview Ray Price, but I've been told, because he was my hero. I actually supported Parramatta the first couple of years, for up till about 10 years old. I loved Ray Price and Sterlo and all that sort of thing. But there's a theory, and it's not a good idea to interview your true heroes. I've done it a few times and been really disappointed. I don't know whether they can smell the fanboy sort of air coming off you, but yeah. But I've been warned about interviewing Ray Price. Apparently, he's pretty grumpy and doesn't really care what sort of medium it is. He's a little bit like Tommy times 10. If he hears this somehow and wants to sit down and have a yarn, that'd be great. But I don't know whether I'd actually be able to get through it, because too much of my childhood hero idolizing sort of thing is wrapped up in that bloke. But yeah, it'd be interesting to interview Johnny Raper as well, just to get to the bottom of, was it like, how different was it back then? Has anyone even asked him, what would life be like if there was social media and cameras everywhere? I don't think they have. I think everyone's just put words into his mouth as to how the good old days were. So yeah, and if I'm going to interview people like Munster and Kalen Ponga and that sort of thing, it'd be nice to interview the versions of them back in the 50s and 60s. It'd be a pretty fun exercise, I reckon. Yeah,
Definitely.
Well, thanks for dropping in, mate. You've got to duck off soon, so absolute pleasure having you on, and hopefully we'll get you on again sometime down the line as well.
Oh no, thank you so much. As I said, your show's fantastic. There was an episode that you did, and I'm not just saying this because this is one of the only episodes I've listened to. I listen to it a lot. You had a great conversation there about why it would be a terrible idea to have a draft in the NRL. It would have to have been one of the most intelligent conversations I've ever heard about rugby league. Like, in all my years, it was a thorough analysis of the situation. It wasn't just, we can't do it because of this. You really went into the because of this part, and it'd be great if you kept that up. And I know that you will, because you're both really good connoisseurs of the game, and makes really good listening, boys. So enjoying it.
Thank you so much. Thanks. And we're so happy that you enjoy it, and you've been a big supporter of the podcast from the very beginning. So it's been wonderful, and so we thank you for that. And it's fantastic to have you on. We hope to have you on a number of times going forward, because it's great to to talk to people about the game that we all love, and just having the different ideas and aspects of the game coming together in a conversation. We love it. We just absolutely love doing this.
Yeah, and if I find the time to fire my podcast back up, you'll be the first guests on it, boys. So
beautiful.
How's that for a massive
anytime? Yeah.
That's called easing back in after you've gone around interviewing, awesome players from the 80s and 90s in there. Get these two blokes on.
Yeah, but they'd be nothing without the fanboy turned 40-year-old sort of aspect of it all, would they? They'd just be old grandpa sitting in his back shed somewhere. So yeah, they do rely on fanatics like us to keep their legend alive anyway, I think. So
that's true. That's very true.
Yeah, thanks for popping in, mate. And we will definitely catch up with you later on down the line.
Okay, yeah, no worries at all, boys. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can check out Ferg on the Freak. We're on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, everywhere there is. So and check us out on Twitter, Fergo Freak Pod, and we'll catch you all later.